Good morning, third graders. It's good to have you here on this Wednesday morning. We're going to take a look at some New Mexico history. This is going to be a two-part slideshow, one part being this Wednesday and the next part being next Wednesday. So I hope you enjoy learning about New Mexico and the history of how did we become a state. So let's go ahead and take a look at where we began. The history of New Mexico and the highlights. New Mexico history is the story of how the state came to be and what we know today. This is the story of all these events that transpired in the history of New Mexico. Transpired means happened. New Mexico state history begins over 1,000 years ago. At this time, the area belongs to many different tribes of Native American Indians. The Apache, Comanche, Zuni, Ute, Navajo, and Pueblo tribes, and also the Hakomi and Hano tribes. The tribes have their own alliances. That means alliance or allegiances. Allegiances mean that they are working together, and there are battles that are waged during the course of their living together. So they didn't always get along all the time. New Mexico history is not complete without realizing how influential and ancient our Indian tribes are. There are ancient Pueblos and Petroglyphs dating back thousands of years thanks to these ancient peoples. Their unique culture still fills the state today, making it a wonderful place to explore. So as you notice to the left, there is a map of New Mexico, and on it you will also notice that there are some areas that still have Indian tribes, or what we call reservations. And these tribes own those specific parts of land in New Mexico. So remember, Native Americans were here before anyone else was, including people from Spain and also United States. So they're a very important culture in our state. New Mexico history, the conquistadors. Just over 600 years ago, the Kingdom of Spain and Portugal are determined to expand their territories. Expand means widen, right? Increase. In order to increase their wealth, they want to conquer as much land as possible, taking the resources for themselves, and because European countries at this time are fighting to become more powerful than the other. So at this point in time in Europe, and you're going to have a map in the next slide, they are going across the oceans and conquering and taking the natural resources from these lands as much as they can and sending it back to their countries of Spain and Portugal. Focusing on conquering lands with natural resources, precious minerals, and spices means Spain has greater power and wealth. They are not interested in countries close to their own, but rather distant countries. It is with this goal in mind that Spanish conquistadors set off across the seas to discover new, rich lands ready to be taken for their crown. The crown meaning the king or the queen that is ruling at that time. So conquistadors were Spanish soldiers that came to conquer or overtake these lands, and actually the Indians were probably one of the most sought after at that point in time. In the history of New Mexico, the Spaniards land in Mexico in 1540 while searching for Florida. So they missed Florida and they ended up in Mexico. Yes, Europeans discover New Mexico accidentally. The Spaniards' route to Florida is altered or changed when storms and tides cause their ships to wreck on the coast of Mexico. Their survivors, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, and his slave Esteban, wander for 8 years in northern Mexico and some parts of southern Texas. So they're in Mexico and they start to explore for these 8 years in Mexico and the bottom region of what's now the United States. While they don't find Florida, they claim or say they find something even better, the 7 cities of gold. So these two return to Spain and report their findings to the Spanish Viceroy, Antonio de Mendoza. And the Viceroy is like a ruler, but not the king or the queen. He's more like a helper of the king or the queen. Their stories about Mexico, its riches, and its people made them the premier explorers of Europe. That means special. Curious by the descriptions of the 7 cities of gold, or Cibola, a new crew is sent to investigate. So they send out another exploration team. Marcos de Niza is hired to find the cities and overtake them. Esteban, which was his slave at that time, remember it talked about him, serves as his guide. But he dies during the search and the trip is considered unsuccessful. Determined to find the cities built of gold, Mendoza allows Francisco Vasquez de Coronado to conduct the next expedition. In 1540, Vasquez de Coronado arrives and begins exploring southern New Mexico and Arizona. Mistakenly, he believes a Zuni Indian settlement to be Cibola and captures it, wiping out and conquering a large part of the Zunis. They are no match for the powerful armor and weapons of the Spaniards. So they basically kill off many of these Zuni people because they think that they have these cities of gold, when actually a lot of people believe it's that because, and if you look at the next slide, the actual adobe homes that they lived in, they believe that if the sun shines on them just the right way, that they kind of glisten and look like gold. So many believe that these cities of gold that they thought were there were actually these pueblos that people thought were gold, but they were not, because they just seemed like they were glowing like gold. So guess what? After the conquest, Vasco de Coronado is greatly disappointed when he found no riches, no streets paved with gold, no houses adorned with jewels as Cabeza de Vaca had promised. So over the next 2 years, the conquistadors continued to explore Cibola, or the southern part of what is now New Mexico, and were the first European explorers up the Rio Grande. They even discovered the Grand Canyon, and the Grand Canyon is in Arizona. So they went up fairly high into what is now the United States southern area, and they didn't find anything, but they did explore a lot of the country. But again, no riches or gold were found, and ultimately they returned home to Spain without even finding the 7 cities of gold. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go into your Schoology Social Studies folder and now answer some questions about this time in New Mexico's history. I hope you enjoyed learning more about your state and the history of your state, and hope you will enjoy next week as well. Have a great day, guys, and see you on Thursday.